What? Why are you shaking your head? You're welcome.
What is going on, guys? It's the Week 6 UFL breakdown. I'm here, as always, millionaire maker winner and one of the winningest spring football DFS players of all time, Neil Orfield. Neil, how you doing this week?
My hat can kind of tell you. Timberwolves just closed out the Lakers last night, so doing really well from that standpoint. From a UFL standpoint, not quite as well, because the Brahmas just appear to be the worst team in the league. I did not expect this. I thought they were going to be awesome this year. I thought they were going to be a championship contender, and that has not happened. They are quite arguably like the worst team in the UFL right now. So that's been sad. Last week, I know it went pretty well for you, Jake. It did not go well for me from a DFS standpoint. You got second. You were one play away from winning the flagship last week. Maybe the last 5-figure flagship we're going to have this season.
Yeah, definitely unfortunate not to get there on what probably will be the last 5-figure flagship. I think you're right there. Maybe we luck out and we get one for the championship game. Ended up being a pretty good week for me. It was kind of funny because I had like multiple teams near the top in the main. I had a team that was looking really strong in the 2-2-2, and then I was also sweating the showdown. So the final few plays of the last game on Sunday definitely had me on the edge of my seat. But yeah, ton of fun. Really solid week for me. Wish I could have gotten home, but I mean, it was a crazy week with scores. And honestly, to have a team that didn't have Hakeem Butler finish top 5 was kind of a miracle on its own.
Yeah,
so
true.
Not too bad there. But for those of you who are playing UFL DFS or betting on any UFL player props this season, I think you're really going to want to subscribe to either our UFL package or our all-in package over on fantasypoints.com, which includes UFL, college football, NFL, and the Fantasy Points data suite. You can actually save 20% on our all-in package with promo code ALLUFL, especially post-NFL draft. I think really strong value there. Tons of great content coming from everybody over at Fantasy Points. But here's what you get in just our UFL product: projections for every player in every game, main slate DFS ownership projections, a weekly written breakdown of the DFS slate, access to our paywall Discord where I provide notes on coach speak, any insider info I find, and breakdowns of single game showdown and Sunday only DFS slates. You also get our official picks for player props. So far this year, we've gone 24 and 21 for plus 2.8 units. That's a plus 19% ROI. So pretty strong results there. We also just cut the price down for UFL to $70 for the rest of the season. That will be our last discount until right before the playoffs. So I think now is a really good time to take advantage. Neil, best part of this week is the totals have come up a little bit. We actually have a little bit more scoring across the league. Last week was a pretty massive scoring week. This week, we start off with the Arlington Renegades plus 3.5 at the St. Louis Battlehawks. Totals 42. We're back to some pretty strong totals here. This is the only game I'm going to say this, but there's no real big injury news to keep an eye on here. Depth charts came through as expected. St. Louis will be without one of their starting tackles for this game. That's really the only fantasy relevant note I could find looking through injuries. Neil, before we talk fantasy on this game, any interest in the betting line? Arlington 3.5-point dog, total 42.5. This feels about right to me.
I would take Arlington, and I would take the under. I think those are my leans. I don't feel like super strongly about it, but I'm not totally convinced that Max Duggan is going to be like a great quarterback. I think Arlington, like, they're very good defensively, and I think they're just a really solid team. So anytime I can get them as the underdog, I'm interested. And also, like I said, I'm not a total believer in Max Duggan, so I kind of think this game could be, underwhelmed scoring wise.
Yeah, I think that's fair. If I had to decide, I'd probably take Arlington plus the 3.5. I think my big concern for St. Louis is that they probably won't be able to mount a comeback if they did get behind. I mean, they've been very run heavy, and Duggan looks pretty limited as a passer. We'll talk about that a little bit more shortly. Let's start with the Arlington side, Neil. I mean, this is kind of same old as we had been discussing the last few weeks. Luis Perez is still doing Luis Perez stuff, obviously not moving a ton. I think the biggest note that I had on Arlington here was Isaiah Winstead only ran 26% of routes last week. I thought this was pretty weird. I didn't find the exact play that he got hurt, but I am almost certain this was due to an injury. He popped up with a knee injury on the injury report this week. All good to go. Still listed as a starter, so I'd expect routes to kind of return to something closer to what we saw in weeks 1 through 4 with Isaiah Winstead. But Outside of that note, not sure I really have a ton to add here. Last few weeks, Canella and Vaughns have largely been dominating targets. We also saw Deontay Burnett scoring a long touchdown a few weeks ago. Javante Payton's still getting a ton of design stuff on like jet sweep, pop passes, screen passes, stuff like that. Where are you at on Perez and these Arlington pass catchers? I feel like this isn't necessarily a week where anyone's going to really want to go this direction.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I was actually coming in prepared to say that I probably wasn't going to play it just because, again, I think that there's pretty strong quarterback options, not quite as strong as last week, but still like pretty solid quarterback options across the board. I'm looking at the past couple weeks, St. Louis allowing 249 and a half passing yards per game, though. That is kind of intriguing when when you have Luis Perez there, you have a sort of condensed, pretty condensed wide receiver rotation. So I'm maybe changing my tune. I actually think Luis Perez at low ownership when you can double stack him is kind of interesting to me. We've got him at what 7% projected ownership. I might actually come above that number. I'm debating a little bit. That's sort of intriguing to me just because we do have the condensed rotations and St. Louis been struggling defensively, and I think of them as being one of the stronger defenses in the league, but maybe need to change that narrative.
Yeah. I think they're probably still getting a little too much credit in people's minds for how they started the season. I mean, obviously that dominant performance against Houston and in week 1, especially, I think really stands out. Not sure that's particularly relevant now. And, I'm always pretty interested in single digit owned Perez. I think this Arlington offense is very competent, and I wouldn't be surprised if they had a game here where, you actually need Perez plus maybe his running back plus 2 pass catchers to get you there in the flagship. So yeah, I think I'm right there with you. I certainly like the Perez angle. I don't know that I necessarily have any preferences relative to what we have projected in terms of the pass catchers here. Yeah, all this feels about right. I think, the main thing with the pass catchers would probably be Cannell and Vaughns are going to be by far the highest owned guys. So if you are double stacking Perez, really easy to keep ownership down by just working in a Winstead, working in a Burnett, working in Javante Payton into those double stacks. I think probably my ideal way to set up a Perez stack would be like Perez plus one of Cannella or Vaughns plus one of, Burnett, Winstead, Payton, at least for the main slate. I think that's pretty strong. Anything to add on those pass catchers, Neil, before we talk backs here?
No, I'm just looking through them if I have any like strong preferences. I mean, Sal Cannella, I kind of thought he might come in at lower ownership this week just because he has not really been getting it done. He's been pretty underwhelming, but I think it's probably right that he probably does come in at double digit figures. They all kind of look like they're all sort of expensive. It is the one downside. We used to have, somebody would be 4,600, 5,400, whatever. One of them would be a little bit cheaper. And this week it's not. We're not really getting that price discount. 8,300 on Cannella, 7,000 Tyler Vaughns. It's even JP Payton is pretty. What is he? 6,600. I was just looking at it and now I've lost it. Regardless, it's just like none of them are really great values. So tough to play more than 2. I still think probably requiring a double stack makes sense here. I don't have any super strong opinions about who to play. I guess Burnett's sort of interesting at 3% ownership, but I don't know that he should really be much higher than that. So it'll probably just be mixing and matching for me. They all look like they're slightly too expensive, but I like it obviously within a stack. And I think I will probably, this is one of the few things that I got right last week was requiring when I played either of Luis Perez or Jordan Tiamu a double stack with a bring back, which I don't usually do in UFL. I was under the field on all of it, so it was not a great call by me there, but at least that part of it worked out. I think I'll do the same thing this week with Luis Perez, require a double stack with a bring back.
Yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense. These are, I think this game, and then we'll talk a little bit about DC and Michigan later. But these are the 2 games that really stand out. I mean, you can tell by the totals; they just really stand out to me as well from a game stacking perspective. In part because of how, especially DC and Michigan, those offenses are extremely condensed, but also Arlington. I mean, we have a very good idea of how usage is going to go in this offense. Speaking of usage, this backfield was pretty similar to what we saw last week. It was interesting because Kalen Ballage ended up with 14 total opportunities compared to just 6 for Day Hunter, 1 for Davion Smith, classic short yardage spot for Davion. But snaps were almost dead even. 47% for Kalen Ballage, 56% for Day Hunter. Still, though, Ballage ended up with 66% of backfield weighted opportunity. What are your thoughts on those two? I Personally, I'm probably just going to mostly lean into Balaj, but we're still seeing Day Hunter work in for red zone touches. I think the coaches view these guys as pretty much equals in terms of backfield usage, but things have been skewing more towards Balaj the last 2 weeks. He's led the backfield in total weighted opportunity. Where are you at, Neil?
Yeah, I think Balaj looks like a pretty strong play against St. Louis's
Yep.
defense has not been that great recently. They're, I mean, a little bit better against the run, allowing 94.3 yards per game, so not great, but also not as atrocious against the run. I think the Balaj ownership feels pretty fair to me, and honestly, the Day Hunter, like we're projecting for 3%. I think that seems fine to me. This is a week where, as I mentioned to you before the stream, no more mini max, so I can't do the 150 and play everybody a little bit
Yeah.
thing that I usually like to do. I think I probably don't end up with any Day Hunter as a result. If I'm only playing 20 to 35 lineups, I think I'm probably not going to be getting to any Day Hunter. I think he seems fine if you want to throw him in a lineup or two as a contrarian option, but I'm not sure that I get there. I will get to some Balaj. Yeah, I think he looks like a strong play. Looks like the better running back. And the coaches seem to like him at least a little bit better. And the coach, you can remember this summer, that was one of the things that we knew coming in was that they loved Balaj. So yeah, I think he's a fairly strong play.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think I'll probably end up with 1 to 2 shares of a guy like Day Hunter, and I would imagine most of those will be within Luis Perez lineups, just banking on Arlington, scoring a ton of points here. This game maybe turning in to a bit more of a shootout. On the St. Louis side, Neil, Max Duggan, awesome fantasy performance from him last week. I think the real story here, he leads all quarterbacks in fantasy points per dropback. A big part of that is because he just hasn't had many dropbacks. But the real story here is just how much St. Louis is running the ball and how much Max Duggan is running the ball. Duggan's roughly played 2 full games. Obviously, Manny Wilkins started last week and then had that terrible injury, but league low 41% pass rate in those contests, the last 2 games from St. Louis. 41% pass rate is very, very extreme. The only team that I can think of that's really been around there in spring football over the last few years was the DC Defenders back in the 2023 XFL when they were just hammering Abram Smith nonstop. This is very, very extreme levels of run heavy. And over the last 2 weeks, Max Duggan, 21 carries. That's more than any other quarterback and 7th most among all running backs. 33% of those rushes have come in the red zone, and only teammate Jacob Saylors has as many touches inside the 10-yard line as Max Duggan. That would be 5. So this is an incredible rushing workload for Max Duggan as a passer. Like I mentioned earlier, obviously extremely limited. I think the good news for Duggan, at least for fantasy, is that we have Hakeem Butler, we have Ja'Cory Pearson. Those are 2 guys who we have projected for over a 20% target share. After that, it gets pretty thin. Frank Darby and Gary Jennings are still out there a lot, but they're not necessarily earning targets. And I don't think, very few passes on this team, so I don't think the team's going out of their way to scheme targets to those guys. It's really just the Hakeem Butler and Ja'Cory Pearson show. So, Neil, I'll throw it over to you. How do you feel about Duggan? And then how do you feel about these? I would assume pretty much all single stacks for you. I'm probably only going single stacks with Max Duggan. I just don't think the volume's going to be there. I don't think St. Louis wants to throw, even if they were down. I think they try to avoid throwing about as much as they possibly could. So, yeah, where are you at here?
Yeah, I think that's right. Probably just single stacks, or at least I'm only going to require single stacks, and I would guess that's kind of what I end up with. I think I'll end up under the field on Duggan once again. Maybe I'm wrong, but this rushing feels unsustainable to me. It just historically he has not been a threat to rush for 100 yards in a game. Like this seems a little bit different than what we've seen from Max Duggan in the past. Maybe it's real. I know he's been running a ton. Also, like the 1 touchdown throw to Hakeem Butler was sort of a fluke play. Like I don't know, it just doesn't seem like something that was kind of a broken coverage. So I don't want to bank on that, and it's a really tough matchup with Arlington here. So all things considered, just given the price, the matchup, and the fact that I'm not convinced that he is, and I'm happy to be proven wrong, but so far I'm not convinced that he's going to be an elite quarterback. Obviously not their first option. So I think that I am going to be underweight to the field on Max Duggan. But I do think the pass catchers are pretty strong options. Obviously, Hakeem Butler, we liked him last week. We like him again this week. He's just 7,300. He's out there. He's probably going to be out there maybe even more this week. And I think the 24% ownership feels fair for a player like Hakeem Butler. I might even come up on top of that number. I think he is still too cheap at 7,300. Like he's probably an $8,500 type of receiver. Once he is at speed. Actually, what did his route share end up at last week?
Let me check that. He was pretty close to full time, if I remember correctly off the top of my head. 86%. So actually led the team in routes last week. I know Anthony Beck said post game that their trainer just wanted to hold him out for an extra week so that he could be, like totally full strength, totally good to go last week when he played. So yeah, I mean, I think I'm with you there on Butler. I've kind of gone back and forth on this. Part of me thinks the field's just going to click his name because he did have a massive game last week. And, as I stated, the raw volume for Hakeem Butler is not going to be good, especially relative to other wide receivers in his price range. But we've seen, I mean, Neil, he might only need to catch 2 passes to just totally break the slate. And I'm really struggling with the ownership here. I wrote in my article that I think he's going to go a little bit over-owned. But again, when I saw the 25% number sort of come out of our projections, I was like, I feel like that's probably about right. I wouldn't be shocked if he ended up at like 30, even 35%. I know people love clicking Hakeem Butler, and he's been a spring football staple, and he's always been making big plays throughout his spring football career. I think the contrarian angle would be to just play Ja'Cory Pearson, who we have projected for 1% ownership. And, it's mostly screens. Like Hakeem Butler is going to have the much better chance at like a deep touchdown. But Ja'Cory Pearson could still get you there on a 25% target share. And he's down to 6,800, which is a pretty cheap price for a guy of his talents. Would you have any interest there on Ja'Cory?
Yeah, for sure. I like that call. That is pretty low ownership. And as we were also discussing, really hard to predict ownership because one player just being super in on a guy can really change the ownership quite a bit. You just never know who Furby's going to like. And Furby might be all in on Ja'Cory Pearson this week. And if he does, then I'll want to have Ja'Cory Pearson because Furby also crushing it. I think Ja'Cory Pearson, very, very strong contrarian play. This is the first game of the week, unfortunately, so we can't say like this is a pivot option if you need to get off Butler. But I think 6,800, like I'll want to have at least a share or two in my lineups, even if I only play like 20. I think Pearson a very strong contrarian play.
Yeah, especially on Duggan teams, and we do anticipate Duggan being pretty popular. I would imagine Te'amu, Bryce Perkins come in a little bit higher, but Duggan should still be pretty popular there. And yeah, just to touch on what you said regarding ownership, I mean, I feel like ownership projections are getting tougher and tougher as the contest gets smaller and smaller because, like you said, if like me or Furby or, Cody Main or Alex Levy from ETR, if any of us take a huge stand on a guy, I mean, that on its own could swing ownership by just a couple percentage points because obviously we're all max entering and are 2.5-3% of the field, just on your own if you submit 35 lineups right now. So, please keep that in mind. Ownership projections are going to be a little bit more fragile as these contests get smaller. Backfield, I think we can breeze through pretty quick. Sort of the same situation as last week where St. Louis didn't run a ton of plays and the game was pretty close. As a result, Jacob Saylor's 88% of backfield weighted opportunity on a 73% snap share, 14 total opportunities compared to just 3 for Jarvion Howard. Of course, he's ridiculously expensive, $11,400 over on DraftKings, which is about as expensive as you'll see anybody in any sport, right? But this is the best workload by far of any running back in the UFL. By total weighted opportunity over the full season, Jacob Saylor's is at 15.3. The next closest running back is Zaquandre White, who, of course, is now in a backfield committee with Kirk Merritt, Lorenzo Lingard. He's at 12.1, so pretty massive drop-off there, and there's only 5 players total in double digits. One of those is Jacob Cabote, who just got cut, so really only 4 players remain that are at double-digit weighted opportunity, and Jacob Saylor is still pacing for a top 5 season in terms of usage among modern spring football running backs. Where are you at on a very expensive Sailors and kind of a tough matchup against Arlington?
I still think I'm going to lean into it. I think I'm going to be above weight to the field on Jacob Saylor's once again. Just one of those, like he has, like you said, though, the best role of any running back in the league. We do have the added threat now of Duggan stealing those touchdowns. We saw he stole 2 of them last week, but Saylor's got the first opportunity, I believe, on both of them. At least I think he got 2 opportunities before they went to Duggan on the last one, right?
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, he was so close to scoring on one of those where if the ball was in the other arm when he went across he like ran right over the pylon. If the ball was in his left arm instead of his right, it would have been a touchdown. So, and we were still worried about this with Manny Wilkins, so I don't necessarily think it's a huge hit to his touchdown equity. I have a slightly lower than when he was playing with Wilkins, but not by much. Yeah, I still think Sailors is a really, really strong play. I think the toughest part with Sailors, and this wasn't an issue a few weeks ago because there was so much value on the board, especially at wide receiver in the lower ranges. That lower price wide receiver value is really drying up. So that is something we need to keep in mind with Sailors, is he's just a little tougher to fit this week, which is why I have him a little closer to say 35 or 40% ownership as opposed to the 60% that he was for a good chunk of the season. But yeah, still a great play. I'm sure I'll find a way to get him in as many lineups as I can, given the salary constraints. All right, Neil, we should be good to move on to the only game on Saturday. I have no idea how the schedule worked out this way, but we are blessed with our second showdown slate for Memphis and Houston on Saturday. The Showboats are 4.5-point underdogs. The total here is a very gross 36.5. Any bets here, Neil? I think I like Memphis plus 4.5. I don't feel particularly strongly about it, but these are both two teams that seem to have kind of turned a corner in terms of finding their quarterback, and certainly seem a little bit better than they did earlier in the year.
That was my first instinct, was to take Memphis, but I'm like, man, because I just want to bet against CJ like all the time. Like
Yeah.
It kind of feels like a fluke anytime they win.
Right.
But also, like, I also don't know that I want to bet on Dresser Win continuing to be like legit. Like, he looked pretty legit last week.
Yeah.
I'm not totally buying that. So I don't really have any super strong read on this game. And Jalen McLennan actually looked pretty good last week too. So I'm like, I'm tempted to take the under, but maybe they found something. They've got some good receivers there. So I think it's all kind of a wash for me. I don't really see anything I love.
Yeah, fair enough. Gives me a little extra time to read a very lengthy injury report for you guys. On the Memphis side, D. Anderson, Kai Loxley, and Jalen Jackson were all limited on Tuesday and Wednesday. Elijah Stove practiced in full on Wednesday. He's expected to return this week from his concussion. The Showboats also signed Dawood Davis, who I believe was injured. That's why he wasn't with the team earlier in the season. Offensive coordinator Noel Mazzone noted that Dawood just arrived at team facilities a day or two ago. And, given that this team just sort of switched offenses to Noel Mazzone's system, I would be pretty surprised if Dawood was active this week, but that's certainly something to keep an eye on. Also, they signed Wes Hills to the running back room. Again, I would be a little surprised if he was active on kind of a shorter week. This was a Monday or Tuesday signing. But, definitely something to keep an eye on. Really, I have kind of no idea what will happen with these active wide receivers for Memphis, but thankfully we will get a depth chart tonight. I'm very glad this is a Saturday game and not a Sunday game, because especially for these ancillary Memphis wide receivers, I have no idea what this rotation could look like. We will talk about that a little bit shortly. On the Houston side, Marcus Sims did not practice on Tuesday or Wednesday due to a hamstring injury. We should find out more about that tonight when the depth charts are released. Also, I thought this was a little interesting. Damon Arnett mispracticed on Tuesday and Wednesday with an abdomen issue. If he's out, I would consider this a slight boost for Jonathan Adams. Anyone who watched when these teams played, I believe it was in week 2, would note Arnett actually shadowed Adams for a good chunk of that game. A lot of press coverage, a lot of man-to-man, and he was relatively effective at keeping Adams in line. Houston's reliance on man coverage, I think, could certainly benefit a guy like Jonathan Adams, especially if they're without their top corner in Damon Arnett. So that's something to keep an eye on as well. Neil, Memphis Showboats Dresser Win was pretty great last week. Ended up scoring about 20 fantasy points, if I remember correctly, 17 for 29, right around there. Seemed relatively efficient. Also, he hit D. Anderson for, roughly an 80-yard touchdown. It's really tough because, well, I guess in some ways it's not tough. We know if we're playing Dresser Win, we want to pair him with Jonathan Adams and Kwame Lassiter. Beyond that, I think it's fair to say it's very, very tough to figure out what Memphis is going to do from here on out. The only other note that I wanted to add on these wide receivers before I hand it over to you, Neil, is that I said last week I thought Chris Pierce would be more involved. Jim Turner said we're going to get the tight ends more involved. Chris Pierce is going to be more involved. That actually didn't happen at all. They went the opposite direction. A ton of 10 personnel. Isaiah Washington logged a 71% route share, which was very, very strange, pretty surprising. He also earned 8 targets. Theoretically, in a world where, say, Kai Loxley, Dawood Davis, and D. Anderson are all out, I mean, this is probably another good spot for a discount on a guy like Isaiah Washington. That said, this is all pretty theoretical at this point because, like I've said 3 or 4 times already, just don't really know what Memphis is going to do here. But yeah, what do you think of this Memphis passing attack? Any thoughts on them running just a ton of 4 wide receiver sets? Thoughts on dress or win? What do you think?
Not going to get to any dress or win. I mean, he was
Okay.
good at for like a $6,000 value last week. He was good enough. I don't think that he has the $9,000 value like upside here. So I guess it's a strong matchup. So that is the one thing you can say for him. Like if he's going to beat anybody, this is one of the best spots against Houston. But I just don't think that I am a believer there. So I don't think that I'm going to get to any dress or win. The receivers, strong enough plays, like you said, Jonathan Adams. He's expensive now at 9,000, but don't hate it. I think I'm probably not going to get to a ton of Jonathan Adams. My guess is that I'm under the 10-11% we're projecting the field for. Kwame Lassiter, I think at 5,500 would be my I'd have more interest in Kwame Lassiter, just because, as you said, the value is not that strong on this slate. I think Kwame Lassiter at 5,500 still feels like a pretty good value there. I think this is one where it's kind of hard to talk about because we really need to see that injury report.
Right.
Like who's actually playing here.
Yeah.
I almost have interest in Dawood Davis for the large field stuff. It's maybe not large enough field that I need to be considering Dawood Davis, though, with 1,100 people in the main contest this week.
If he's active, right? And I mean, there's
Right.
also the world where he's active and earns like a 20% route share because he's brand new to the the team and the playbook. But yeah, I mean, at 8,500, it does probably feel a bit too thin. I mean, it's hard to see. He's a great talent, and I think if he were on this team throughout training camp and everything, he'd be right there with Jonathan Adams, probably ahead of Adams as the wide receiver 1. For this week, though, it's hard to say. Short week. He's only been there a few days. Noel Mazzone said that he had never worked with him, prior to him showing up. He was like, "Oh yeah, Dawood has a great reputation, but I really don't know, anything about him. He's got to earn it just like everyone else." So, kind of starting from scratch here for Dawood. I do think there will be a couple week-long ramp up here.
Yeah, no, I think that's probably a fair guess that he's probably not going to be there. Yeah, I probably don't get to any. Maybe a showdown only play, and that assumes he's active.
Yeah.
And then D Anderson, similarly, like D Anderson was the star last week. He outperformed everyone, and he's only 4,100. So on a slate that we have very limited value, like that's sort of intriguing. But also we don't know if he's going to be active. I think if he is active and Dawood is out, especially, I'll have interest in 4,100 D Anderson. But I don't have like a crazy high amount of interest. And then Isaiah Washington also looks like a strong enough value at 3,500. Not a slam dunk type value, but somebody that I might have a little bit of interest in, depending on who else is in and who's out.
Yeah, I could see either of, sort of assuming they miss like Loxley and no Dawood. I could see either Isaiah Washington or Elijah Stove push for like a 65% route share, which, for main slate still feels pretty thin. Again, Dresser wins the quarterback. We're not expecting a ton out of Memphis offensively here. But for showdown, I think, those guys are going to be really, really intriguing plays. So big note for Memphis would just be, I'm sure I'll publish a projections update later tonight, early tomorrow. Keep an eye out on that because the depth chart will really, really guide us here on Memphis. Thank goodness this is a Saturday game. When it comes to the backfield, Neil, I did think it was pretty telling that in Noel Mazzone's first game as, the main guy calling plays here after Jim Turner sort of noted that, they really want to get their best players out on the field. Deneric Prince, 66% snap share, 80% of backfield weighted opportunity. I do assume it'll be him and Jalen Jackson again this week. Beyond this week, I'm pretty concerned him and Wes Hills are just going to be in a 50-50 timeshare, with Wes Hills probably getting more stuff inside the 5, inside the 10, and he's a bit bigger of a guy. But for this week, assuming it is just Prince and Jackson, where are you at on Deneric Prince? He's projecting to be pretty popular and is projecting pretty well in our stuff.
Yeah, this is one that stood out to me when I first looked at the ownership projection, saw Deneric Prince as the second highest owned running back for projected ownership. I'm like, I don't really want to play that at all. If Wes Hills is out, I think I'll still be under the field, even in a great matchup. So they do have a great matchup, and like he's not that expensive, and like you said, the usage pretty strong last week. I think I would be underweight to the field a little bit if Wes Hills is out. If Wes Hills is in, then I'm going to have real concerns there, and I'll probably be half the field. Like I think I would be significantly under 30% if Wes Hills is there, just because there's some chance that he's going to eat into the workload a little bit. But it's obviously a best possible or maybe second best possible matchup now with the floundering Brahmas. But yeah, I think the price tag is pretty nice on a slate where we don't have a ton of value at 6,300. The matchup is about as good as it gets. So I think Generic Prince, he's a strong play. Like he is probably a cash game play. I think that I probably end up a bit underweight to Generic Prince overall. And then I actually think Jalen Jackson, just because, again, the price tag when we're hurting for value at 4,400, again, has this great matchup. And like looking through your article, I mean, these backups have been among the best in terms of weighted opportunity in general. So yeah, I think I guess Jalen Jackson down to 8.7, but still like top 10 in terms of weighted opportunities per game. So yeah, I think Jalen Jackson, a pretty strong contrarian play, who is also a really strong value. I think I'll be overweight there probably if Wes Hills is out.
Yeah, obviously dependent on Wes Hills being out. I am always a little bit more worried with early week, midweek running back signing. Running back seems to be the easiest position for guys to just come in. I mean, you stand right next to the quarterback, so you can just tell you exactly what to do.
Yeah.
But assuming Jalen Jackson is up over Wes Hills, that's an interesting angle, at 4,400 to go that direction. I wouldn't be totally shocked if we saw, I mean, certainly in the cards for Jalen Jackson to earn something like 52% of backfield weighted opportunity in a game like this, push for closer to a 50% snap share relative to last week. So yeah, I don't think I'll go that direction, but that is an interesting angle and maybe one that I need to think about a little bit more myself.
And some leverage there. Just adding that.
Yeah, that would be
being super popular.
That would be huge leverage. I do think what do we have? Like a 34% ownership projection on Prince. I think I'm going to bump that down just a little bit. I'd imagine he ends up somewhere between 25 and 35%, but I'll probably keep him just a hair under 30, something like that. Cause yeah, I imagine most people are going to see that number and be like, oh, no way I'm playing a super popular generic Prince, which is always something you got to keep in mind when doing the ownership projections. All right, let's talk Houston Roughnecks. Neil, I think it's safe to say Curtis Johnson did the impossible and he started these quarterbacks in reverse order of their actual skill. Jalen McClendon has looked really, really good. Like I talked about last week, this is a guy who only has about 400 dropbacks in professional football and college football and NFL preseason since 2014. I mean, he's 29 years old and he's barely played, especially in, whether it's spring football or NFL. I always want to leave a little bit of room just in my head that, these guys can improve and take a step forward. And I think especially for a guy like Jalen McClendon, who's barely played, we need to give, some credit where it's due that maybe he's just better than what we saw out of him in 2023 with the Las Vegas Vipers back in the old school XFL. Neil, we feel pretty confident that he's going to play every snap. It seems like the Houston Roughnecks have really settled on him as their quarterback. Plus, Nolan Henderson's still on the injury report. I mean, there's no way you're playing Anthony Brown over this guy. 12% Jalen McClendon seems pretty tempting, especially when, Marcus Sims is looking iffy. I think things will be very, very condensed around Justin Hall, who's, at just under a 30% target share on the season, leads all players in target share. Not necessarily surprising there, but it does make stacking McClendon pretty easy. Something like maybe a McClendon plus Saquandre White plus Justin Hall looks pretty good here, even relative to ownership. Where are you at on McClendon and this Roughnecks offense?
Yeah, I think I'll be above weight there. I still think this is a strong matchup, even though it has not really looked that strong in recent weeks. Memphis only giving up 149.3 passing yards per game over the past 3 weeks. I think that's just kind of a fluke, though. Like I'm still not a big believer in this defense. So I think, yeah, Jalen McClendon, and he looked great last week, much to my chagrin as somebody who jammed the Brahmas defense and got all the other defenses wrong. I was like, okay, the Brahmas are going to take me to the promised land, and then they were just bad. And Jalen McClendon looked great. So yeah, I think this is a spot where I will be above weight. I think McClendon looks like a really strong play. He can do it with his legs. Like you said, he's got Justin Hall there, really, really strong option. Kiki Chisholm looks like a fairly strong option at what is his price tag? He's at 5,900, getting like very little ownership. I think he's a strong contrarian option. We'll see if Sims plays. If Sims does play, I would actually have interest in Sims also at 6,500. But yeah, I think McClendon, somebody I'm going to be overweight to the field on. Justin Hall, probably going to be, we've got a fair amount of ownership going there, but I think I still might be with or above the field at 25%. I think that feels pretty good.
Yeah, I think I might like McClendon just a little bit more than even Max Duggan. Although Duggan, obviously provides a bit more as a runner. McClendon's looked really strong as a passer. I'm pretty much right there with you at wide receiver. The one thing I wanted to know with these wide receivers is, I mean, Houston has been so weird with these rotations. Justin Hall, he still has his guaranteed role in the slot. He's still getting peppered with targets. Everything else has been very strange. I brought up Lawrence Keys last week. I wrote him up in my article. I was like, hey, we need to maybe think that a super cheap Lawrence Keys is actually just going to be out there no matter what. No, that did not happen. 34% route share for Lawrence Keys. Oddly, Emmanuel Butler popped up with a 69% route share in week 5. Marcus Sims was only at 43%. Maybe the hamstring injury Sims is dealing with influenced that route share a little bit, but they've been weird with Sims in previous weeks too. I genuinely wonder how long it's going to take for them to settle on their 11, base personnel set being Kiki Chisholm, Justin Hall, Marcus Sims, because that's arguably the best, 3 wide receiver set in spring football right now. And, Houston seems to be kind of avoiding that for whatever reason. I will say if Sims is out, I think either Lawrence Keys or Emmanuel Butler could be argued as intriguing value options, like very contrarian, low price guys that you can pair with McClendon. And we should get more info on that tonight. But yeah, otherwise, I'm pretty much in line with you. I'll have mostly Hall here paired with my McClendon, a little bit of Chisholm, and then maybe some Sims. I think Chisholm has the better role between the two, but we could easily see that flip as, obviously Sims still kind of new to the team. Backfield here, Neil. Zaquandre White leads the way again, 9.1 weighted opportunities, 48% snap share, 46% of routes. All of those numbers led the backfield, 50% of backfield weighted opportunity in total. The leftovers were split between Lorenzo Lingard, who had 6 rush attempts, and Kirk Merritt, who also had 6 rush attempts and 1 target last week. I think there's a chance we see, maybe Lingard could be inactive this week. I think that's possible. It seems Houston doesn't really trust him. He's just getting like these empty calorie snaps for the most part, nothing inside the red zone. I'd be fairly intrigued by either Merritt or White if this was a 2-man backfield. I think especially White, but yeah, what are your thoughts? I mean, this will probably be a gross committee again. White projects pretty well, but yeah, I'm curious what you think here.
Yeah, I like it. This is we talked about, like I said, the passing defense has not been as bad for Memphis, but the rush defense has been the worst in the league over the past 3 weeks, allowing 145 rush yards per game over that span. We don't have to consider Lingard at all. I think Zaquandre White looks like a pretty strong play at 7,200. The price tag has come up enough that it's not like a slam spot for me. I think 14% ownership feels about right to me for Zaquandre White. I actually really like Kirk Merritt as a contrarian option. He was, a penalty away from 2 touchdowns last week, and I think it could be that he was got less of an opportunity because he's still kind of working his way back from injury a little bit. I think that was his second game back, right? Or was it his first? I don't know. He was hurt for a little while and he's still coming back. So who knows? He was seemingly the guy earlier in the year. He looked good when he was out there. When he got the ball again, he scored 1 touchdown. He had 1 called back due to a penalty. But I think he just looks good when he's out there. So if he's going to be low enough owned and he's cheaper than Zaquandre White, that intrigues me. So I think I'll be significantly above weight to that 1%. By significantly above weight, I mean I'll probably have 10-15%.
Oh, nice. Okay, yeah, I really like that, especially kind of similar to Day Hunter. I really like Kirk Merritt on like a Jalen McClendon team in case Houston just really runs up the score. I also love Kirk Merritt for showdown. I ended up winning the Houston Roughnecks showdown slate last week with a Kirk Merritt lineup. I was shocked, 8% in the flex, Neil. I mean, this was
crazy.
Like one of the best plays of the year in showdown, and probably will be again. I think people are just gonna think, okay, Houston's a gross offense. Do I really want to play their RB2 in, kind of a slow pace game? I'll go with the defense instead. But no, Kirk Merritt's a good player, and he's still getting snaps lined up at, slot wide receiver when they go empty. They seem to always want Kirk Merritt out there on the field. So always some room. Neil's right too. Like this was his first game back. So always a little bit of room for this workload to increase as things move forward. And of course, if Lingard is out, then I think Merritt's, he'll obviously come up in projection, but also he'll be a bit more popular. So for the sake of him being a contrarian play, I might honestly prefer it if Lingard's in, because if Merritt earns more snaps, it will probably be more so at Lingard's expense than Zaquandre White's expense. All right, Neil, I think we're just about good on that game. We can move on to my favorite game of the slate, DC Defenders at the Michigan Panthers. DC is a 2.5-point underdog. Total here is 42.5. Neil, any interest in the betting line on this game? I like DC as an underdog here.
Yeah, I mean, DC should just probably not be an underdog these days.
Yeah.
So I like that call. Debating, I think I still like the under here at 42.5. I don't know. I don't feel that strongly about it, but DC's defense, I think, is pretty good. Michigan's defense is pretty good. I guess DC just moves so quickly that seems to negate any kind of defensive issues. So no, I think it's about fair. I don't have any real strong take on the over under, but yeah, I think I'm with you that I like DC as an underdog.
Yeah, I maybe a bit of wishful thinking for me since I do really want to stack this game up, but I think I would prefer the over. 42.5, not nearly high enough for teams that are moving the ball like these two. On the injury front, Cornell Powell did not practice on Wednesday due to a hamstring injury. Devin Ross was limited on Wednesday due to a hand issue. For what it's worth, head coach Mike Nolan said that Ross was very questionable. They really weren't sure, this was on Tuesday, if they would have him or not. So keep that in mind. Really just a Sunday only thing. With Devin Ross, you're not getting to him on the main slate. Samson Nakua also suspended this week for hitting a fan, Neil, hitting a Battlehawks fan. Neil, allegedly he was spit on. Do you think that's justified that he hit that fan if spit on? And then if not spit on, would it still be justified if he was just getting heckled super hard?
If spit on, yeah, slap him. He didn't do enough. He just one little slap. I saw the video. There was not much there. If just heckled, this is Puka Nakua's brother. Let him do what he wants. Yeah, no, we shouldn't be suspending players for a minor little slap with the fan. The fan probably deserved it.
Yeah, I think good chance the fan deserved it, especially if he spit on Samson. I think 100% justified.
Oh yeah.
If no spit, a little more questionable. I think a game suspension makes sense. When I first saw the video, I thought, they could suspend him for 2 to 4 games. But I'm sure, he probably told the league he was spit on, and they were like, oh, okay, that's actually pretty reasonable to hit someone who spit on you. But yeah, all right, let's talk fantasy here. DC Defenders, Neil. I thought in week 3, even week 4, hey, they can't keep doing this. They can't keep running 70 or 80 plays a game, and yet they continue to do so. 69.8 plays per game for the Defenders right now, easily pacing to be the greatest or the most plays per game in spring football history. Extra insane because of the clock rules. I listened to an interview with Noel Mazzone, who is Memphis's offensive coordinator, yesterday or earlier today. And he was like, oh, yeah, these games are tough because due to the clock rules, you're probably only going to get off 55 plays per game. And I was like, man, you better watch some DC Defenders film because they're running 70 plays per game right now. Right now, that is their current plays per game is 9.2 more plays per game than the next closest team this season, which is Michigan, who they're playing. So this should be a great game for pace. I wrote in my article, Teamu's effectively playing 5 quarters of football to every other quarterback's 4. And you can really say that about every DC Defenders player because they're running so many plays. Again, 69.6 plays per game is so extreme. It would be the 4th most in all of professional football. So obviously including the NFL over the last 5 years. This is, again, just insane play volume. And I really can't emphasize that enough. I'm projecting DC for about 65 plays per game. And I think you could argue that I'm 5 plays too low. They just keep doing the impossible and running a ton of plays. They're also throwing the ball at a pretty decent clip, Neil. And that's led to us, once again, for I believe the 2nd or 3rd week in a row, Jordan Teamu is our highest projected quarterback. And with quarterback pricing being so tight this week, I think, it's probably either him or Bryce Perkins in cash. And I would probably lean toward Teamu. Where are you at on Jordan Teamu and, what is an incredibly condensed offense? We know what the 3 wide receiver set's going to be. We know Abram Smith is going to lead the backfield. This feels like a really easy team to double or even triple stack. My lineup last week that finished 2nd in the main slate was a Teamu triple. Honestly, I was overweight on Teamu. I don't think I had nearly enough triple stacks. Yeah, again, the volume here is just crazy.
I think it's a good one again to double stack. Like we said with Luis Perez, I think double stacking Teamu makes a ton of sense, requiring that double stack. This team has probably cost me the most money on the season, just fading Jordan Teamu. Back-to-back weeks I've taken the under on Jordan Teamu passing yards, and it's every game, the first 14 minutes of the quarter, he'll put up like 5 passing yards and then just like a 70-yard bomb at the end. And then by halftime, he's over 200 passing yards somehow. So he has been absolutely crushing it. I believe, I mean, last week you were in on Teamu. Like that was one of our biggest differences, was that you were really in on Teamu. And I was like, this is just too much ownership. For this kind of play volume to keep up, you kind of need the opposing team to also cooperate, because if the opposing team holds the ball too long, like that's going to limit the number of plays with a game that moves so quickly. And then I think the number of plays increased that they ran last week somehow. So maybe it's more sustainable than I think it is. I think that this is a tough enough matchup also with Michigan over the past 3 games. Michigan allowing just 140 passing yards per game, 106.7 rushing yards per game. It's just a tough defense here. So I think with the tough matchup, with Teamu's price coming up and the ownership coming up, I am going to be underweight to it again. I'm going to let him just continue to crush me. I'm going to learn my lesson. I'm not going to take the under on Jordan Teamu's passing yards unless they put it up over like 240 or something, because it's been around 200 and I've been taking the under, and that's just, he's making me look foolish. But I'm not going to make that mistake this week again, but I am going to be under the field, I think, in DFS. But like I said, when I play him, I am going to require a double stack. I think that is because then you're just kind of betting on, well, what if the volume is still there? What if the other team does cooperate? And I'll probably require a bring back also, because I also like the Michigan offense enough to require a bring back. Yeah.
I am right there with you on all of that. When it comes to the also wanted to say back-to-back 300-yard passing games for Jordan Teamu. Very rare for quarterbacks to hit the 300-yard passing bonus in spring football. Teamu's doing it just on the back, like I said, of massive volume. And I think the way DC plays defense also really plays in to this offense running a ton of plays, because the defense is extremely aggressive. So they're largely either getting 3 and outs or they're giving up big plays that lead to quicker drives, more play volume for the opposing offense. So kind of have the offense and defense working in conjunction to lead to just somehow 80 plays for DC in like multiple games this season. I mean, I think they've had 2 games at 78, another game at 72, and the other few have been like mid to high 60s, which is, again, just crazy. Pass catchers here, very confident the 3 wide receiver set is going to be Chris Rowland, Cornell Powell, Braylon Sanders. Sanders looked really good last week. He was rotating a little bit with Javon Antonio. I will say that if Powell misses this game, Javon Antonio will be a full-time starter, and he will be arguably the best value on the entire slate. He will be a fantastic play if Cornell Powell misses. A little bit more speculative of a play right now. What's Antonio's salary? Let's see here. I don't have it pulled up.
I'm looking.
4,000. 4K. Okay, yeah. I mean, if you're playing a ton of Teamu, I think you could still get to a little bit of Antonio, even if Powell plays. But like I said, without Powell, Antonio would be, not like a lock button play for me, but probably like a 40 or 50% owned kind of guy in my own lineups. But yeah, I mean, I'm fine with any of those guys. I think all of the 11 personnel starters between Powell, Rowland, Braylon Sanders are fantastic one-off plays on top of being great pairings with Teamu. Do you have any strong preferences there between the 3? I feel like I'll largely just mix and match kind of similar values across the board, all projecting for over 20% ownership.
Yeah, I think that they all look like, I mean, we have Rowland coming in at 37%, Braylon Sanders 24%, Cornell Powell 25%. Okay. No, and I think that is about what it probably should be. I think I will again be a little bit underweight to that 37% on Chris Rowland. I was last week pretty significantly underweight, and then he ended up doing really well once again. I think he's like, he's not a bad play at 8,200, even at 37% ownership. I think that is totally fair. I suspect I'll be a little bit underweight here again, just because the Michigan defense has been really strong against the pass. So if we're going to get a chalky player at 8,200 against a great defense, I'll just hope that he does not score the touchdown this week. So I think I'll be a little bit underweight on Rowland, but I think 6,000 Braylon Sanders looks good. 6,200 Cornell Powell look good. They're both fairly priced. And then I think Javon Antonio, I agree. Like if Cornell Powell is out, I agree with you. I will be playing a lot of Javon Antonio. Chris brings up Briley Moore at 4,400. I don't know that he has the upside that I think I need, because we just have limited spots on our teams, and he's not a full-time player. Like he would probably need to score 2 touchdowns to be somebody that you want in your lineup. I think we've reached the point in the season where, like, even for a cheap guy, 10 fantasy points is probably not enough. Maybe I'm just extrapolating from what we saw last week, but you tend to see scoring go up in the UFL throughout
Yeah.
the year. So I think, like, we're getting to the point where you really need some upside in every spot in your lineup. So I think that's probably not someone I'm going to.
Yeah, Bradley
On the
Moore was
main side.
only at a 31% route share. I think, something that I would love for Sunday only would be like Teamu plus all 3 wide receivers plus Bradley Moore, and then you just hope he throws for 350 and 3 or 4 touchdowns, right? But Bradley Moore is probably more of a Sunday only play for me. Same thing with a guy like Jaden Mickens. I think if Cornell Powell's out, you'll probably see a little bit more from Jaden Mickens. 52% route share last week. It's just tough because he's competing with Roland for the slot routes, but they'd be so thin at wide receiver without Cornell Powell that they probably would have to give Roland or Mickens just a little bit more work on the outside. Would also probably run more 12 personnel, so we'd see more of both tight ends in that scenario. Neil, this backfield, no one wants to play Abram Smith, and I get it. He's expensive. DC's throwing the ball a ton, and he really hasn't done anything. Also, a little concerning last week, Deion Jackson actually earned a better workload by weighted opportunity, 5.3 compared to Abram Smith, who is at 4.4. That said, Abram Smith still at 63% of snaps compared to 37% for Deion Jackson. Abram Smith did end up with 9 rush attempts, 0 targets compared to 6 rush attempts and 1 target for Deion Jackson. I feel like we're going to get a huge Abram Smith game at some point, especially with the play volume DC's running. A 63% snap share for Abram Smith, you might say, he's a little expensive. I don't necessarily love that, but 63% snap share for Smith is probably worth, like an 80% snap share on a team like Houston or San Antonio, who's barely running any plays. Where are you at on Abram Smith? Because this is a really tough one. He's not projecting for like any ownership right now, though.
Yeah, sort of interesting just because of the lack of ownership. I wish he was getting more so I could just continue to fade it. I shouldn't say continue. I think I've been playing him a little bit. But yeah, I think at 7,800, just given that we have seen the 25 carry upside that he provides, if he does just finally break one of these, he could pay it off in a big way. So
yeah.
I'm not going to go overboard here because of the price tag, and not a great spot against Michigan, but I might have a share or 2 of Abram Smith, and that would be above weight to the field because there's no more mini max. I'm only playing 20 to 35 lineups this week, so a share or 2 might get me above the field there. But yeah, not taking a huge stand there.
Yeah, I think I like him a little bit more. I wouldn't hate like 8 to 12% exposure in my own lineups. Obviously highly speculative. We know the floor with these guys who are so carry reliant, especially on a team that's throwing the ball a lot. His floor is 3, 4, 5 DraftKings points, but I do think he has a 25, even 30 point ceiling here and at 2% ownership. I certainly like that angle. Neil, Michigan Panthers, our national nightmare is over. Danny Etling not going to see the field. Mike Nolan said, unless something happens to Bryce Perkins, it's going to be every single snap for our boy Bryce Perkins. It pained me because Mike Nolan is such a nice guy to talk to. I couldn't believe he was just making this mistake over and over again. And to be fair, the media, not just like fantasy people, us or ETR or whatever, but everyone in UFL media was just hammering Nolan for this. He's finally come around. We're finally going to see a full game of Bryce Perkins. This is pretty exciting to me. And, to me, the top tier of quarterback play, very clearly Perkins, Teamu, Max Duggan, especially knowing that there's no limit on Bryce Perkins' snap share or playing time. That's really all I have to say about Perkins. We know he's a great fantasy asset. I think runaway favorite right now for UFL MVP, if we had to pick one at this point. And the nice thing is we know his wide receivers are going to be very condensed. COC Mariner, Malik Turner, and Jalen Moore should be the major target earners here. Kind of similar to DC, where we have, all these guys are pretty solid values. Jalen Moore looks like the worst value right now. And then, COC, Malik Turner, they're all projecting for about 20% ownership or higher. How do you plan on playing Perkins, stacking Perkins this week?
I'm only going to require a single stack. I might get to some double stacks because I do really like multiple of these receivers. All three of the top receivers, I think, are really strong plays. So I might get to some double stacks, but I'm not going to require it. It would just be, incidentally, if they make it into my lineups. I'm not going to be mad at it if I end up with, honestly, even if I end up with like 3, I would not be mad at that. Just given that I think they're all pretty strong values here.
Yeah.
COC Mariner, 8,100 looks good. I think I'm gonna. Jalen Moore is the one that I was a little bit disappointed to see the ownership being as high as it was. I thought he might end up being fairly contrarian and he'd make for a strong value play. It looks like we've actually got him at 19%, but I think that I'm gonna be with the field there. I think he's just he's out there enough that I want to have a good amount there. And then Malik Turner is one of the chalkiest receiver on the slate, I think with good reason. I mean, he's 7,100. His role is about as good as anybody out there. Again, this is another one I saw it and I was like, oh, that's too high. Like I don't want. How do you play that much? He had 11 targets last week, right? So I mean, that's just a really strong. And it's been a few weeks now that he's had a very very strong role. Now you get Bryce Perkins in there full time. Much easier to just play the full stack. So yeah, I'll probably be above weight to Bryce Perkins, or at least with the field, but likely above weight there. And I like all 3 of those receivers quite a bit.
Yeah, right there with you. I think the one thing to keep in mind with Jalen Moore is that his ownership will probably plummet if we end up getting, like a good value guy on Memphis or on DC.
True.
Like if Cornell Powell was out, Jalen Moore is probably going to be 5-6% because everyone's going to jam in Javon Antonio. Granted, I do think that news is a little bit dependent on us finding it out before 8 p.m. Some of these depth charts on Fridays have not been released before 8 p.m. Sometimes we get them at 6, which is obviously awesome. Could be anywhere in that window. We've gotten them as late as like 9:30. So yeah, really not sure when those depth charts will be out. And I do think that will influence ownership pretty heavily. I would certainly leave, if you're playing a lower price guy, I would just leave, some flexibility in your lineup. So that you can pivot to like a Javon Antonio or maybe a Memphis value if that opens up. Oh, well, we'll find out about the Memphis guys tonight. So probably mostly just relevant for the DC wide receivers. And then this backfield, Neil, Toa Taua led the way last week. I do think this was partially due to Nate McCrary getting hurt. I spotted 2 different points. One was at about 9 minutes in the first quarter. The other was with about 8 minutes left in the fourth quarter, where McCrary, got the ball, ran hard, and then clearly had some discomfort in like his elbow, shoulder, on his right-hand side. And that led to a 58% snap share for Toa Taua, 15.5 weighted opportunities on the back of 15 rush attempts, 2 targets, 6 red zone rushes for Toa Taua. Even if this is a committee, Toa Taua seems very locked in to his red zone role, especially inside the 5. I don't think they have a ton of confidence in a beat up Nate McCrary inside the 5. If both players were healthy, it would probably be closer to a split. But it just doesn't look that way at all. For what it's worth, McCrary wasn't on the injury report, but again, I mean, he was clearly in pain during the game, and I really don't think he's 100% right now. And then Jaden Sheridan, I mean, just a total backseat. He's like a non-factor now, despite this being technically a 3-man backfield, 3-man committee. 8% snap share, just 1 opportunity for Jaden Sheridan last week. So really a 2-man backfield with Toa Taua clearly leading the way again inside the 5, especially. Neil, he's pretty cheap. I mean, this is the best running back value we've had in quite some time. What are your thoughts on Toa Taua this week?
Yeah, I like him. And I think you can also include him in some of those stacks. I mean, he is 58% route share last week. I think Toa Taua looks like a pretty strong value. Good to have them clear it up for us a little bit. This 3-headed monster that it's really just 2 heads. And he's been playing well too. So it's like even if he got on the field because of a Nate McCrary injury, 15 for 74 last week with 2 touchdowns.
Yeah,
he's really taken advantage of the role, and he was really good 2 weeks ago also. So I think he's probably earned a role that is going to be at least splitting carries, maybe even the bigger workload. And the price is cheap enough that, I think the 25% ownership there, totally warranted. Probably just doesn't need to score 2 touchdowns. He can pay it off with a single touchdown. Running back again is not a super strong position. It since like week 1, it's been kind of disappointing in general. We just don't get that much scoring from the running back position, so it doesn't take a lot. He's cheap enough that I'll take shots there. I shouldn't say I'll take shots. I'll probably be with the field, maybe even above the field at 25%.
Yeah, I found just in hand builds, I find myself going like kind of barbell with my running back exposure, either the cheap guy and Toa or just paying all the way up for
Yep.
sailors is probably my favorite way to hand build, but obviously I'll let the opto handle some of that. Neil, before we move on, do you pay any mind to the motivation narrative for Toa? He was driving golf carts just a few weeks ago. They brought this up on like every broadcast, like every time he runs for 10 plus yards, they're like, oh, he was borderline unemployed 2 weeks ago.
That
Any
sounds like a
juice
pretty
there?
sweet job, though. Pretty sweet job to drive golf carts.
Yeah, not too bad.
Yeah. No, I don't put any narrative into that. Any
Yeah,
weight into that.
we have not factored that into our projections, but certainly if you watch a UFL broadcast, you'd think that should be a major factor in our projections. All right, we can move on to the last game. This is the final game on Sunday. It's the San Antonio Brahmas at the Birmingham Stallions. San Antonio, a 10-point underdog. Total here is 37.5. Neil, I will actually be at this game repping my Ricky Person shirt that you guys can see on this lovely YouTube broadcast. But Neil, I'm curious, who should I bet on for this game? Brahmas plus 10, totals, kind of gross at 37.5. What do you think?
No comment.
Yeah, I don't really have a strong lean on the line. 10 feels about right. Neil, my question for you actually is Memphis versus San Antonio, neutral field. Who do you think would be favored?
No comment.
Oh man, that's not
who
good.
would be favored? I can say, okay, who would be favored? Probably Memphis. It's probably
Oh,
Memphis.
man, how far the Brahmas have fallen. Only 34 passing yards last week for San Antonio. Here, let me talk injuries, and then we can talk a little bit more about how bad this offense has been. On the San Antonio side, Greg Ward, Matthew Sexton, Jontre Kirkland, Jarrett Guarantano, and Aiden Robbins did not practice on Wednesday. We only have one injury report for San Antonio so far. Today's injury report should help a lot with figuring out their status. On the Birmingham side, Jordan Thomas, Austin Watkins, and Matt Corral did not practice on Wednesday. Cookus is expected to be the starter for the foreseeable future after James Larson, friend of the show, good follow on Twitter, reported that Matt Corral's injury is a bit worse than expected. I don't think they're going to IR Corral, but we'll probably get another 2 or 3 games at least of Case Cookus down the stretch here. Okay, Neil, San Antonio side, I mean, this was one of the most shocking results that I can remember in modern spring football history last week. San Antonio lost to the Houston Roughnecks by 24 points. I mean, this was a complete domination. Like I said earlier, only 34 passing yards. Kellen Mond actually got benched for Jarrett Guarantano. Very surprising, given that Guarantano, I just really do not think is the guy. But I think that also shows you just how desperate San Antonio is to get some offense going here. The other problem, Neil, is that we don't know who the starter is going to be. Apparently, Peyton Pardee said on Wednesdays with Wade, which is now Wednesdays with Peyton, that he wants to play it close to the chest. They haven't formally announced anything. Obviously, we'll get a depth chart, but I really don't think the starter, like the QB1 is going to be the QB1 in name only, right? There's a good chance it's, 50-50 split. There's a good chance whoever is the starter throws one interception and they're just done for the day. There's no way I could convince you to play either Kellen Mond or Jarrett Guarantano this week, right?
Correct. Yeah. I mean, it's the play calling. I mean, they down 18-0. They have 4th and 2 on like the 25-yard line, and there was just no hesitation. Field goal, like just like, come on, field goal time for Peyton Pardee. So I am not loving this is like the least aggressive offense. They're running it on 2nd and 10. They have no interest in moving the ball apparently or scoring touchdowns. So I cannot play either of these quarterbacks.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I want to say, generally speaking, younger head coaches do tend to be more aggressive. I honestly think a big part of that is like these are guys who grew up playing Madden, so you have a better understanding of how certain plays impact win probability. Very surprising to see Pardee kick on that 4th and 2, and I think it just demonstrates, much like the Kellen Mond benching, that they have no faith in their current offense, in the personnel. I mean, the receivers are good. We know Anthony McFarland is good, but the offensive line has not been good. Obviously, quarterback play has been terrible. Play calling has been very, very bad. I think either Mond or Guarantano are very viable for the showdown slate on this game. Even Sunday only, though, either guy feels very thin, especially given the other Sunday only quarterback options. Like, do we really think a Kellen Mond could outscore Bryce Perkins or Jordan Ta'amu, even Case Cookus on Sunday only? No, I mean, I probably won't go that direction. But as like flex plays for showdown, I think viable. Wide receiver here, Neil. This is, I think, maybe the only time all year we've had a team where no wide receiver, no player actually is projected for over 10% ownership. Jacob Harris still looks pretty good at 6,700. He's earning the downfield stuff. He's kind of like maybe Hakeem Butler light. Gets a little bit more work on the outside compared to Butler, who will play, kind of a quasi tight end role at times. But I think that's a decent comp. Any interest in a Jacob Harris, Jontre Kirkland? Weirdly, Greg Ward's routes came way down last week. It was actually Marquez Stevenson who led the way in terms of slot routes. Stevenson was at 57%, Greg Ward at 25%. And then you also had Matthew Sexton working in a little bit. So, yeah, I mean, I've outlined it all, Neil. This is very, very gross. Any interest in these San Antonio pass catchers?
Jacob Harris, yes. I think Jacob Harris at 9% ownership is a player that I'm interested in.
Okay.
Last week was obviously rough, and I was expecting big things from Jacob Harris last week. I think he got hurt for a little while, right? If I'm remembering correctly.
I don't think. I mean, he was at a 96% route share. Maybe I missed something on the broadcast, but he was at least out there for every play.
Yeah, no, I'm wrong then. I think Jacob Harris still looks like a really strong play. I'm gonna just going to ignore last week. He's just had a really strong role on this team in general. He's not that expensive still, so I think Jacob Harris is actually a pretty strong play. Somebody I want to be above weight to 9%. Really, really tough to want to get to Jontre Kirkland at this point, just given the price tag hasn't really, it's still 8,700 somehow. And he's the wide receiver 2 at this point. So I think that is just too thin on such a short slate. Can't go to Greg Ward. I've been probably the only one playing Greg Ward for weeks now anyway, but even I am going to jump off that train. And Speedy Stevenson, I would say, is a fine pivot. Like it's the last game of the slate. So if like you really need to come from behind, you've got $5,000 left over. I think 4,900 Marquez Stevenson, okay as a pivot, but that's the best thing I can say about Marquez Stevenson.
Yeah, really not many good things to say about any of these San Antonio wide receivers. I can't give away all the juice here on the show, but there is one super cheap San Antonio wide receiver who I think could be active and could be a great play for Sunday only showdown. That's in my article. That's also in Discord. So definitely go check that out if you're playing Sunday only or showdown. Certainly not viable. I mean, arguably none of these guys are viable for main slate. But yeah, I'm probably only going Jacob Harris when it comes to the pass catchers. When it comes to the running backs, Anthony McFarland still projects the best, but Neil, I mean, that's largely because of how efficient he's been. 7 yards per carry, which is just, I mean, incredible at this point in the year. But Jayshawn Corbin led the backfield in terms of weighted opportunity last week, and Corbin and McFarland both tied with a 38% snap share. Aiden Robbins was at 24%. Corbin ended up with 54% of backfield weighted opportunities. Nobody had a red zone touch because that's how bad this offense was last week in terms of moving the football. I mean, Neil, where are you at here? This is probably more of like a Sunday only showdown discussion. Do you think you could get to McFarland on the main slate?
Maybe as a pivot. Like I probably don't go in playing any McFarland.
Okay.
It's so difficult because he's been clearly so good. Like he's clearly their best running back. And it's like, why don't you just give this guy all of the carries? You're not carrying the ball that many times that you need to be splitting the backfield. Just give it to your best running back, but they're not doing that. I guess there's still some chance that they're going to fix that and just give it to the one running back who is running really efficiently. But yeah, I'm not going to be, I mean, 1% ownership is interesting, but still not somebody that I'm super excited about just because, again, they're not moving the ball. If you don't move the ball, you're not going to have any strong fantasy assets. It's tough to get to any of them. Certainly not playing Corbin. What did Robbins end up playing last week? What was his,
He was at 24% of snaps, 3 rush attempts. And obviously, based on the week prior, we would assume he's the favorite for inside the 5.
Oh, right. They didn't get there. That's right. Yeah. You could almost make a case there only because he's 4,000. Like if he is the goal line back, you never know. Even a team that can't move the ball can accidentally move the ball with a penalty in the end zone, a pass interference, and then the $4,000 goal line back could look okay. But not a ton of interest in any of these guys.
Yeah, I'm right there with you for like Sunday only or showdown. Would you have a strong preference there? I think they're all viable. I'll largely let projections dictate. I think the main thing to keep in mind would be that Aiden Robbins probably has the best ceiling relative to his median because his touchdown equity is so strong. But, maybe you can make the same case for McFarland. I mean, he could rip off a couple 50, 60-yard touchdowns. Yeah. Any preference there if you're playing a showdown lineup or two between these backs?
Yeah, I think McFarland, I think that's right. Like he just even with limited opportunities, he's got enough juice to just rip off a long touchdown.
Yeah.
So I do think McFarland probably the preference there. I think Aiden Robbins kind of interesting for showdown also, again, just because you don't need as many points. So that one fluky 1-yard touchdown is pretty meaningful on a showdown slate.
Yeah.
So I think both are meaningful, are playable on the showdown slate, but neither are like players I want to have in 50% of my lineups either.
Yep, I think that is very fair. On the Birmingham side, we have another game of Case Cookus. I mean, say what you will about their football ability, but I think it's great for the league to have two quarterbacks in Max Duggan and Case Cookus who are ready to die on the field for their team. Cookus, very willing runner last week. I believe 70 rushing yards, which is pretty great for him. He looked healthy. He looked pretty good throwing the ball. And we know, Birmingham, as I've said in weeks past, generally has struggled to run the ball. Granted, this is one of their best rushing matchups of the year, and they should have plenty of positive game script. They've still been one of the most pass-heavy teams in the league when leading, though. Neil, what are your thoughts on Case Cookus? And then we can talk these wide receivers because it's kind of looking like more of the same. But yeah, what do you think about Cookus?
Cookus, I think, is a really strong play. I mean, he's only projected for 12% ownership at 9,200 in arguably the best matchup in the league. He got us there last week. It was not easy. I mean, I should say it felt like I thought he got us there. He got 23, 24 fantasy points, and then got outscored by multiple other quarterbacks. So in the end, was not a quarterback that you really wanted, but good enough. And this is a strong enough matchup that I think I'll go back to Case Cookus here, and I'll be above weight to the field.
Yeah, certainly think that's fair. I definitely like Cookus too. Argument against would obviously be like a guy like Jordan Teamu, Bryce Perkins. They have way better game environments. But Cookus has the better matchup. And like I said, Birmingham isn't necessarily taking their foot off the gas from throwing the ball when they are leading, which I do think plays into Cookus's hands pretty well here. Neil, I mean, when it comes to the pass catchers, we just really haven't seen anybody except for Deion Kane be consistent here. Kane was at an 80% route share. Jay Sternberger was at 85%. Everyone else was at 60% for Davion, and then lower, 52% for Marlon Williams. Everyone else below 50. To me, I'm probably just pairing Cookus with Deion Kane, Davion, Jay Sternberger. I really don't think you can get to any of these ancillary guys. I do believe Austin Watkins got hurt last week, but I mean, even if he's out, I don't think that's going to lead to a ton more snaps for these outside guys, at least not enough for me to use them on main slate. Probably more of like a showdown Sunday only type of note. Any interest in like branching out between kind of the big three of Jay Sternberger, Davion Davis, and Deion Kane?
Yeah, I think that three was my cutoff. I'm like sort of debating, could I get to a Marlon Williams or a Jalen Camp, only because of the matchup. So just because the matchup is so good, like you can kind of make a case for those guys. I don't know that I'll get there, but I do like those big three. I think look really strong. Deion Kane, I think, is worth the price tag at 7,900. Again, I like Cookus, so I'll have a lot of stacks here, and Deion Kane, I suspect I'll end up above weight to the field. One of my bigger stands last week was Jay Sternberger. I was well over the field. That did not go well for me. I think he scored the 2-point conversion. I think I'm going right back to it though. Even after last week was really subpar. It was gross. But he's still cheap, and he has some of the best pedigree of any of the pass catchers in this league, and he's down at 4,300 in a great matchup. I am going to go back to it until I lose all my money. I'm going to keep playing Jay Sternberger well above the field here. But yeah, I particularly like Sternberger and Kane. I think Davion Davis, a fine play. I think I'll put him a tier below those two. But I like him. I'll be above weight to the field because he is actually not getting a ton of ownership, just 2% projected ownership at 6,100. So I'll be above weight on all three of those three, I think.
Yeah, no, I think that's reasonable. My favorite is pretty clearly Sternberger. I mean, 85% route share in an offense that's passing a ton in a great matchup is awesome. And just thinking back like to week 1 or week 2, I don't necessarily think Sternberger's role is dramatically different than what we were hoping for or expecting, preseason. And we'd be salivating, if you rewind a month for a $4,300 Jace Sternberger. So I think that's a pretty strong value, probably one of the best value plays on the slate, especially if you assume like Cornell Powell plays and we don't get the Javon Antonio chalk that we were talking about a little bit earlier. Also, Jordan Thomas is hurt, so that could lead to a few more routes for Jay Sternberger. I really don't think this team trusts Marcus Baugh as a receiver. I think they view him more as a blocking tight end. It was kind of interesting during Skip Holtz's post-game press conference last week. He noted that they run almost all of their 2-point plays out of 12 personnel, but Jordan Thomas was hurt, so they had to come up with new 2-point plays because they really practice everything out of 12, which I thought was a little interesting. Jordan Thomas would also probably potentially break into my main slate cookie stacks, but especially Sunday only. If Jordan Thomas can go, I think I'd really like me some Jordan Thomas because he basically only sees 2 kinds of targets that are 20 plus yards downfield and targets in the end zone. So really great for sort of those splash big plays for fantasy. Neil, we can round it out with this backfield, a very, very disappointing backfield this season. But I mean, this has got to be like the ultimate get right spot for the Birmingham Stallions running backs. San Antonio, obviously a great matchup, and they're 10-point favorites. So they might try to get the ground game going here. I mean, this feels like the spot for it. Ricky Person is down to 6,500. I think what's more interesting about this backfield, though, and I wasn't quite sure how to interpret this, was CJ Maribel, very clearly the usage king last week. Obviously, it was pretty strange that they kept 3 running backs active. That was the first time, at least since they've been in the UFL, that Birmingham has kept 3 running backs active for a game. Larry Roundtree, I don't think logged an offensive snap. CJ Maribel and Ricky Person were almost dead even in terms of snap share. Maribel was at 45%, Person was at 47%, but usage very clearly in Maribel's favor. Maribel finished with 8 rush attempts, 6 targets, and the lone red zone opportunity for the Birmingham backfield. 74% of backfield weighted opportunity to Maribel. Person only ended up with 8 rush attempts, 1 target, and 26% of backfield weighted opportunity. My thought here was that, Person's still a little beat up. That's why they kept 3 running backs active. That's why usage skewed a little bit more towards Maribel. And, snaps were basically 50-50. So I'm not sure you have to read into this too much. I guess I'd skew maybe a little bit toward Maribel being the better play, but especially if Roundtree's down, I think we'll probably see the 50-50 backfield we've grown used to. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that I almost think if Larry Roundtree is active, that's a better sign for Maribel because it means that probably means that Ricky Person is still a little bit banged up.
Yeah.
So Maribel probably leads the backfield again. And so I think it's kind of like if Larry Roundtree is active, I think I'm going to be playing mostly Maribel, and because of the spot, I really like Maribel here. He's 7,500, 15% ownership. I think that's a number I probably come in overweight on. And then if Larry Roundtree is out, then I will have some interest in Ricky Person at 6,500. I guess we've got him projected for double-digit ownership, so not like super contrarian. Yeah, there he is. Look at that beautiful shirt. He is Jake's guy. Was once supposedly going to be the starting running back for the Dallas Cowboys. Many people were saying it last year.
Many were.
That did not come to fruition. So now we still get to play him in UFL instead. I'll like him better if Larry Roundtree is out. If Larry Roundtree is in, I still think playable. Like he still played some last week. You could see that come up. I mean, there are shades of being banged up. He's probably a little bit healthier at the very least. So I think playable. But yeah, if Larry Roundtree is active, I'll have mostly just interest in Maribel.
Yeah, that's roughly where I'm at too. Even if Roundtree is up, I think, Person for Sunday only, especially Showdown, would still be pretty strong. Again, I really don't expect Roundtree to get any work. It's just kind of an indication as to how healthy is Ricky Person. So certainly keep that in mind when Friday depth charts release, but I think both of these backs are pretty strong plays. Would you have any interest in playing both these guys in the same lineup?
Yeah, I think you could do it. I mean, they're expensive enough that it's not like my favorite thing to do, but I do it all the time in like Showdown in particular, where it's just like, well, what if they're just people don't want to play 2 running backs on the same team in Showdown, but it's often like they both get there because they're just running all over them, and like they take a big lead and you just have to run out the clock for the last quarter and you're running it every time and you go back and forth. So yeah, I think you certainly can play them both just given how good the matchup is, and they are favored by quite a bit. So yeah, no real issue with playing both of them together.
Yeah, not sure I'd get there on main, but for Sunday only and showdown, I think I really like that angle. All right, guys. Well, that'll do it for the week 6 edition of the Fantasy Points UFL breakdown. Another great show in the books. We really appreciate everybody who was watching or interacting in the chat. Really appreciate the flannel verse for the dual broadcast here. But yeah, guys, thanks again for watching, and we will see you all at the top of the leaderboards. What?
Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.